Hello and welcome to the Wellness Connection podcast with Fiona Kane. I'm your host, Fiona Kane, and today I've got a returning guest. Her name is Sam Ebblewhite. Hi, Sam.
Hey, Fiona. I met you a couple of episodes ago and we talked about mental health then, and today we're talking about body image. I'm a somatic sexologist and an intuitive healer. I'm trained in kinesiology and I just love being able to share my journey, with mental health and body image, and then my passion about supporting others, but particularly women on their journey, whatever that is.
Yeah, yeah. And if anyone's looking for that episode, it's episode 83 was the last episode that you appeared on. So if anyone wants to jump over there, they can learn more about you. But I'm glad to have you back. Last time we sort of mentioned that this time let's talk a little bit about body image. And maybe I might just start with what interests you about body image. Tell me a little bit about your story.
Yeah, I was thinking about it today actually in preparation for the episode. And, when I suppose my body image challenges kind of started, and it probably goes back to when I was about 11 or 12 and started to put on a bit of weight. I'd been a healthy, happy child, but, there was dysfunction in my family. We'd moved to Melbourne. My parents were fighting. They were having marital issues. And I think food began to be a bit more of a comfort for me. And so, my mum was an amazing cook and always cooked healthy food, but we probably had too much. And treats were sort of everyday things. And I think it became an outlet for me. So I sort of ate my feelings, I suspect. And then with hormones and stress and things like that, I'd started to put on a little bit of weight. And I think that was when I began to kind of be conscious of my body, as well as a time in life where I probably wasn't very happy. And that was the beginning of that journey. My mum had battled a few demons herself and insecurities, particularly around, I suspect, her body image and the way she looked. And so she passed some of those on to me as well. And, I can remember as a teenager, getting ready to go out and feeling good about what I was wearing. And the first thing she would say to me was, I think you have put on a little bit of weight. And so then, it became all about the way I looked and my body, and I suppose focusing on what was wrong with it as opposed to, health and other aspects. I was lucky that mum was a nurse, and so we always approached it I kind of think of it in a healthy way when I decided to do something about my weight. So I went to Weight Watchers the first time when I was 15, and always tackled it in a healthy way, which I'm really grateful for. So in the last episode, I'd shared, my battles with mental health. But, I was fortunate enough that I didn't develop any kind of eating disorders or things like that. I do suspect I've had periods of my life where I've suffered from a little bit of body dysmorphia, because I know when I got to, my healthy weight, I would look at myself in the mirror and still see myself as bigger than I was. But it's been really interesting kind of rewriting those stories. And, we talked in our last episode about the little voice that says all the negative things. Body image is one of the ones that I still hear that voice at times. And it affected so much of my self-worth. And as a young adult, then it sort of led me on a path where I was quite promiscuous because, it was about self-worth, because if someone would have sex with me, then I must be attractive and I must be okay. Yes. And so it led me down that path. So it's been a really interesting journey, but it all comes down to body image and self-worth.
Yeah, yeah. And something I just wanted to clarify too, just for those listening or watching, I got the definition of body dysmorphia. I wrote it down here just so I could explain what it is for those who don't know what it is. But essentially, it's a Body dysmorphic disorder is a mental health condition in which you can't stop thinking about one or more perceived defects or flaws in your appearance. A flaw that appears minor or can't even be seen by others, but maybe feel so embarrassed and ashamed and anxious that you may avoid many social situations. So that's that body dysmorphia. So one of us has got some messages coming through. Is that you
No,
or is that
it's
me?
me. It's me, and I've got to. I'll see if we can. I'll see if I can turn off the sound on it and see if I can.
I'll just pause this for a sec. We'll come back in a moment.
I apologize.
All right, I think we've fixed that problem. Hopefully, we'll see how we go. But anyway, that's what body dysmorphic disorder is. And look, I think that, in my opinion, I think that everyone goes through something, and especially, puberty is a crazy time. And I think that everybody, no matter whether they're sort of the perfect weight, inverted commas, or a bit overweight or a bit underweight or whatever. I actually personally, just because I talk to women all the time, and not just women, but men as well, but I think this is, historically, it's been a bit more of a woman thing, although now it's men as well. So I think all of us have a certain level of it. And I suppose it's a bit like, last time when we were talking about mental health, like all people experience sadness or different things. It's just at what level does it become a pathology. So I think all of us experience some level of dissatisfaction with our body, or being unhappy with it. But yes, I suppose it's the difference between whether or not you have that awareness and you get on with life, or it affects your life.
Yeah, and I think like you said, you can have moments of it, and you can have, where you and sometimes it can be because you're not quite where you want to be.
Mm.
But I think there are times where no matter, what state you're in, the thoughts can still play a part. And I think, and it can impact your life, and it can impact your self-esteem and the way you operate and conduct yourself with others, and choices of partners. And, I think all of when it starts to impact lots of different areas of your life, I think that's when it's becomes something that maybe you need to look at and get some help with.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Did you ever see the film Little Miss Sunshine?
I did see the film Little Miss Sunshine.
It's one of my favorite films of all time. And I don't know if you remember it, but there's a scene in that film. So for those of you who haven't seen it, essentially this little girl enters a Little Miss Sunshine competition at some sort of like talent slash beauty, I don't know, like kind of pageant type show. And when she arrives at the pageant, and she arrives quite late, and there's all this drama on the way there, it's kind of what the movie's about. But anyway, when she arrives at the place, and she goes into the change rooms and she's getting changed into her outfit. And I think she's seen all these other girls, and I can't remember what's happened beforehand, but there's a few things that have happened beforehand. And she gets in there and looks in the mirror, and for the very first time, she notices her belly.
Mm.
And she's got a little bit of a belly, which is, not an unusual belly, but a little bit of a belly. But you see her for the first time noticing it, and kind of noticing it as a flaw.
Mm.
And that just like, I still think of that moment in that film, and it's like, this little girl's like innocence is like, the innocent time in her life is over, where she didn't think about it.
Yep.
And she's aware now
Mm.
that maybe she's got some flaw or some difference or something that sort of is wrong, kind of thing. And I think that that's happening younger and younger for young girls today, I suppose, because they're growing up in a very different world to the one that I grew up in and the one that you grew up in. They're growing up with mobile phones, with smartphones and Instagram and YouTube and all sorts of images from a very young age.
And comparison. And unfortunately, with, social media and the technology that we have today, images are photoshopped, and we
Yes.
have filters, and we can crop a body, and we can stretch a body, and we can make it look a particular way. That is
Yes.
not real. And
Yeah.
a lot of young girls are trying to compete with a standard that actually isn't even human. It's not even real, but they're at a stage where they think this is what people really look like.
Yeah.
And there's also this huge point of comparison, which is always a danger zone. I think when you start comparing yourself and thinking and basing your worth on how much you look like a particular standard, when we all come in different shapes and sizes.
Yes. Yeah. And that's true, because when I was growing up, so I was a teenager in the 80s. So I was in my teens, and then my 20s in the 90s. And I grew up on all magazines. I don't get any of them now, but I used to get, Cosmo and Cleo and Dolly and all that jazz, all those magazines. And I do remember, like, so we, back in those days, we had supermodels, and it was people like Elle Macpherson and Cindy Crawford, and I think, what's the
Naomi
Naomi's name?
Campbell. Yep.
Yeah, Naomi
Naomi Campbell.
Campbell,
Yep.
and Linda Evangelista, and all those ladies. And that actually, they're not only were they amazing models that, I don't get out of bed for more than $10,000 a day, I think was Linda's saying, but also they were in kind of video clips for rock bands, and they were dating rock stars, and
Correct.
it was, and that was bad enough. But the one thing I think that made it better than today is, I knew, as a 5 foot tall girl from the suburbs of Sydney, that wasn't real, or that wasn't real for anyone except for a very tiny, minute number of people in the world, a bit like being a rock star or whatever. So at least I knew I couldn't be that.
Yep.
And so I might want to, lose weight or do different things to try and be a bit more like them, or wear a certain clothes, or have a certain handbag or makeup or something. But I didn't think I could be that, if you know
Yep.
what I mean.
We knew they were the cream of the crop. They were the
Yeah,
top supermodels.
they were
They were
like
the
nature's
elite.
chosen ones, or
They were,
whatever it was.
they were, like you said, 6 foot. They had a particular. They were and they were the top of their field.
Yes.
Whereas I think now, with the concept of influencers and all of this kind of stuff, it's like everyone's expected to be a particular way, not
Yes.
just, they were supermodels. They were the top of the top of the top.
Yes.
So I think it gave you a different comparison point.
Yeah, and now, because it's influencers, they all kind of look like that, and there's almost a look there, there's that look, and they all end up looking the same. It's like, and rather than be different, because at least with the supermodels, and even if they were touching up, of course they touched up pictures and stuff like that, but they still looked all quite different to each other. But now now this look, the look that's in at the moment, is all exactly the same. But and if they brought in, I suppose, what wasn't around or didn't come in until a bit later, is things like, inverted commas, reality shows. The first round of reality shows, there were actually real people on them who looked real. And after a few years of reality shows now, when you see them, they've all had a lot of work done before they arrive on the show, and they've all got an Instagram account and an OnlyFans account and whatever else is going on. So they go onto the reality show just to pump up their Insta and their OnlyFans or whatever, but none of it's like even slightly reality, and they're not real ordinary people, if you know what I mean.
No, no, it is definitely about people that want to be famous, and
Mm.
that's their agenda.
Yeah, yeah. So it's not just the supermodels now; it's all around us, and even I was in that's where I was the other day. That's right. I was in hospital emergency with a relative of mine, and there was a girl in there that was all done up, and all the face work and everything. Okay, the emergency at Liverpool Hospital, because it's so common these days.
Mm.
And actually, I do know. I know someone who has a group. She's in her. How old is she? She's about 30, and she's in her group of young friends, and they're all sort of from the Blue Mountains of Sydney. All of her friends have had their lips done,
Mm.
except for her, and they're all kind of saying, "Oh, you should get your lips done." And she's beautiful, and her lips are very much in, the right it's the right size based on the way she looks and everything. It's all in, everything's in, what's the word?
Proportion.
Proportion. That's the word. And it's like, wow, but that they just seem to look small because they're not sort of surgically enhanced.
Mm.
So, maybe sort of, can you tell me a little bit more about some of the strategies that you've used throughout your life to help you deal with this body image issues?
Yeah, it's been interesting. So, some of the strategies are a little bit similar to what I talked about in that other episode with mental health stuff. So, I like to talk about rewriting stories. So, and it was a process. So, I went through stages where um, I didn't like things about my body, and I actively sort of worked to change and got fitter and healthier and lost a little bit of weight. And then I noticed that even when I'd got to a healthy weight, some of these negative thoughts still existed. And that was when I started to question where they were coming from, and started to recognize that maybe I didn't see myself the way other people saw me.
Yes.
And that sort of, I was getting counseling and I was doing work on myself for other issues, but obviously these started to play a part too. And I started to kind of observe that how other people saw me wasn't the way I saw myself. And when I started to have enough of those interactions, I started to question the thoughts I thought about myself and go, well, hang on a second. All of these other people don't think these things about me. Why do I think them about me? And that was when I started to kind of unpack it and go, okay, maybe we need to work on this. And so it was a little bit of a process for me. Obviously, for me, I'm mindful that, I want to be healthy and I want to be fit, and I like to look my best and do well with what I can, for myself, but also for others. And I think there's a self-care component to those things. So I did sort of use that as a bit of a strategy. And then obviously, there was a talk therapy component. Awareness was a big part for me though. So even recognizing that my thoughts didn't match the feedback I was getting from other people, that was a really powerful tool to start the process of going, okay, and if this story doesn't match, I need to find a way to get the stories closer together. And then it's been interesting for me. So I shared a little bit in the last episode, but I don't live a conventional life. And, promiscuity was a part of my journey around self-worth. And at times it was not healthy, but then there was times where it was an outlet. And I think a lot of people like to feel desired and loved. And, and I'm a person who sexuality is quite an important part of my life. So, starting to acknowledge that other people could appreciate my body in ways that I didn't, again, helped me rewrite those stories, because it was about gathering evidence that was different to the bullshit I was telling myself.
Yeah.
So lots of different things, energy work as well. And then we talked in the last episode, like I feel like you sort of have this voice or a little person that sits on your shoulder and tells those negative stories to you. And what I found to combat with that was building up the other side, building up the positive stories. So when people would compliment me or, especially when it was a regular thing, you start to go, okay, well, this many people wouldn't be telling me lies, or if it's people that you trust, that have no agenda to tell you something, you have to start to go, okay, well, why do all of these people think this about me, but I don't?
Yes.
Odds are I'm the one with the incorrect thinking and not these 50 other people that have told me something.
Yeah.
So it was about building up that evidence base to counteract my stories. So that was my most powerful one, I think.
Yeah. And actually, even feeling safe to accept a compliment.
Yeah.
As I'm older now, I'm more like when I was younger, I didn't accept them so well, but now I say thank you. And probably I don't get them as often as I used to when I was younger. But it's weird. Many of us, I've seen this in other women, and I've seen it certainly in myself. That as soon as someone pays you a compliment, the first thing you want to say, "Oh no, like why why can't we just say thank you?"
I had a beautiful mentor when I was doing a lot of personal development talk about, it takes a lot for a person to go out of their way and compliment you. And when you discount that, you actually take away that from them, which is not fair either.
Yes.
So in a time where I wasn't comfortable about myself, I learnt just to say thank you. In my head, I'd be like, I don't know what the fuck you're talking about. But it was a process. And then I start to say thank you. And
Yeah.
then when you open yourself up to receive those compliments and you start to hear similar things, it's like, well, again, why would people tell me lies all the time? Maybe they're actually correct and I'm not. And that was a big process for me too.
Yeah. 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 No, it's so much of this is about and again, we've talked about this in the previous episode, just about questioning the stories that we tell ourselves, and it is so important to know that they're just stories and we can question it, but also know that So I'm 53 now, and I still have that voice, and I've been up and down in my weight my whole life. When actually not my whole life, probably because up until the age of about 18, I was very lucky. I'd always been a very healthy weight. Even though I didn't have a very healthy diet, I just, young genes, whatever, whatever it was, genetics, whatever the things that were involved. But I had always been what would be classed as being kind of slim or, a good size or whatever, up until 18. And then when I hit 18, I started to pile on weight, and ever since then it's been kind of up and down throughout my life. And I do remember though, and so confirming what you said, that when I was a size 6, I was still questioning my weight and my size. So the voice doesn't magically go away when you match a certain look, because I look back at the photos of when I was a size 6 and I think, oh my God, you know, and at the time I was thinking, oh geez, you're not there yet, but it's pretty good, but you're not quite there. So I don't
Yeah.
know where they're supposed to be, but
No,
obviously I
yeah.
had a different view of what I look like to what I actually looked like at the
Yeah,
time.
I remember looking back at pictures when I was 19, 20, and I remember I thought I was fat. I thought I had a fat stomach. And I can remember finding some pictures where a friend had done a photo shoot. He was doing a photography course and he'd taken some photos of me. And I was in a fitted dress. It wasn't overly tight, but it was fitted. And I look back remembering what I used to think about myself
Mm.
and laugh, because I was like, my God, I'd kill for that body now.
Yes.
But I didn't appreciate it. And I wasted so much time hating myself and my body.
Yeah.
And it's just, I think it's devastating, the amount of, particularly young girls, but I actually think it's quite prevalent in young males as well now,
Mm.
especially like what we talked about with, influencers and social media and this setting this standard of what you're meant to look like.
Yes. Yeah.
And I just think I just hated on myself for such a long time. And it impacted so many choices I made in my life
Yes.
because my self-worth was so based on the way I thought I didn't look or I did look. And
Yeah.
it just, we face enough challenges in our life, but to spend so much time hating on ourselves is just crazy.
Yeah, well, I delayed studying nutrition by a year because I didn't think you could be fat and be a nutritionist.
Mm.
And so I was like, "Oh, no, I can't turn up at college and be overweight," right? And then I've been up and down since then, and it's like and in my field, it's even more challenging. So it's a bit like I don't know, a hairdresser with a bad haircut or dentist with bad teeth is as a nutritionist when you carry more weight. And because 'cause I'm only 5 foot tall, when I put on weight, I can't hide it anywhere. So, I find that is quite challenging. And I'm in a job where I'm working with people and I'm working with a lot of women around their body image and around their relationship with food and around how they feel. And I'm also aware that my brand is health, I suppose. And it's all very confusing. Somewhere in all that is very confusing because when I gain weight, there's that extra layer of, well, I'm not congruent with my brand. And then if I feel bad about myself or if I have that negative self-talk, which I do, uh, and then I'm teaching people to how to overcome that. And then I suppose it's just proves that I'm human.
Yeah, and I find sometimes sharing our vulnerability and our story gives
Yes.
people permission to work through their challenges and know that, yeah, as humans we're flawed and we're not going to be perfect all the time. And sometimes life throws us curveballs that you turn to comfort food, or sometimes you have a health challenge that impacts your ability
Yeah.
to make the choices or affects your weight and
Yes.
even relationships, all of these life things, we turn to crutches and we
Yeah.
don't necessarily make the right choices. And that's part of being human. And I think one of the challenges with the social media influencer life
Mm.
is that most of the time you only see the good stuff. And
Yeah.
it's not real. People don't show the challenges. They don't show the unfiltered photo. They don't show the photo without makeup.
Mm.
And so people are trying to achieve something that's not real.
Mm.
Whereas when you and I share our struggles and our vulnerabilities, and we're vulnerable and about what we go through, I think it gives other people permission that they don't have to be perfect.
Yes.
It's
Yeah.
just about taking the steps that they need to make to be true to themselves.
Yeah, exactly. And it is the thing about life is life is complicated, and health can be complicated, and mental health can be complicated. And I think you've just got to just travel through it, and one day at a time. And all the things that you talked about, I sort of, people who listen to this will know my mother passed away a few years, and it wasn't just my mother. There was about 4 or 5 people all around the same time, and all of the stress that went along with that. And it was COVID, and it was so many things. And I've had a few health challenges, and then menopause. So it's just like chronic stress, menopause, all of those things. So it is what it is. And I, I refuse to hide away and be feel shame and not be able to live my life because
Yeah,
I'm carrying extra kilos at the moment. It is what it is.
yeah,
And I feel like it will resolve itself in time when I manage, when I'm sort of, well, I'm doing a whole things to deal with it anyway in regards to managing my stress and managing my time and managing my health and all of those things. But I suppose one thing I will say throughout my life is life always has a way of humbling you and grounding you and reminding you of that it's not always easy, and reminding you maybe of what your clients or patients or whatever might be going through. But also, I've done podcasts recently talking to people who are dealing with life and death. So also, you get every so often you get a reality check, and it's like, I'm worried about my weight. Huh?
yeah. It puts it into
Really? It's
perspective,
not
doesn't
the
it?
most important thing about me.
Yeah. Yeah, one of my little taglines for myself along my journey was, about striving to be the best that I can while loving myself as I am. Because I
Yes.
realized, I can try to be better and I can work on myself, but on any given day, I'm going to do better than others. And it's so my focus then became about, okay, how can I heal and learn to love myself no matter where I'm at? Because I should love myself unconditionally, not only if I'm skinny and I'm eating exactly what I'm meant to do and if, everything's perfect, because that's not real. That's not a way to live.
Yes, yeah.
It's about, just accepting yourself, not necessarily being in denial and making poor choices, but going, okay, I'm not where I want to be. What capacity have I got to do at the moment?
Mm.
Have I got lots of things going on? I lost my mum 14 years ago as well. And sometimes when you're dealing with that, exercising and food is not your priority. It's kind of, I was selling a house and sorting out all of the estate and dealing with the grief. So that
Mm.
was your priority. And that's got to be the way you work through it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. With my clients, I used to talk about love yourself to health, and I realized that for some people that was a bit too hard.
Mm,
Couldn't quite get there, and so now I'm sort of say, well, if you can't love yourself to health, you can at least respect yourself to health. And so I talk to my clients a lot about just having respect with their body, and I always bring myself back to things like, okay, my I slept last night and my body kept my heart going and kept breathing and did all these wonderful things for me.
mm,
And I've studied enough anatomy and physiology and symptomatology, diagnosis, all sorts of stuff to know that the amount of stuff that my body is doing constantly,
mm,
I don't even have to consciously think about to manage things and to keep me alive is phenomenal. So I do have respect for that, and I do kind of really appreciate. So I suppose I I'm appreciating my body in those ways.
mm,
So it's appreciating what it does for me. And you can appreciate things like where you get pleasure from your body, or where your body's functioning well, or if you can go for a walk. And I always sort of talk about how I when I'm whinging about having to do weights or go for a walk or whatever, I remind myself I get to.
mm.
Not everyone can.
Yeah.
So there's things like that that I do that just help me kind of get over myself a bit and kind of just get on with it. I find that useful, and I find, because put it this way, you might have trouble loving yourself to health, but you certainly can't hate yourself to health.
That's exactly right.
And so at the very least, I start with respect and having awe and respect about what my body can do.
Mm.
And then slowly, hopefully, you develop love, or at least love for different parts, or different parts of yourself, until hopefully you can love yourself down the track, if that's possible.
Yeah, I work a little bit the same way. So I talk to people about setting themselves up for success, because we have enough stress in our life. So, when I'm giving people steps, particularly around body image and self-love, it's like, it's not about adding new things, because that just adds another stress load, and that can add something that you might fail at. So I talk to people about changing intentions. So, things, most people, one of the ones I work with all the time is, most people have like a regular routine in the shower.
Mm,
So most people will wash themselves a particular way in the shower. And I'll say to them, how about when you're in the shower and you touch yourself, you have the intention that you're giving yourself love and nurturing. And you're taking the time to wash yourself and appreciate your body and appreciate those things. And just changing that intention can be really powerful. And sometimes for people looking in the mirror, I know that was one of my big ones. I can present to the world and put on a face of makeup and dress well and present to the world that everything's fabulous, and hide the bits that I don't like and emphasize the bits that I do. But you have those moments of vulnerability. And for me, particularly, when I get out of the shower and I look in the mirror and I have no clothes on, that's the time that's can be one of my trigger times. And it's be like, can you look at yourself in the mirror and find 3 things that you like about yourself? Just taking those little baby steps to start to build that and appreciate something about you, and just setting yourself up with just taking those little step. Because when we try to do everything at once, it becomes overwhelming, and then we punish ourselves that we haven't done it right and we've failed again, and it just feeds into that old story.
Yeah. Yeah. And also, just like we were saying, humanizing that when you and I use these strategies, we work with people on these sorts of strategies, and you and I still have that voice in our head as well. It's okay. It doesn't have to be a sort of battle to kill the voice or whatever. It as simply is, rewriting a lot of those stories, and it's kind of, it's a practice.
Yep.
And it's a practice of those things, learning how to have respect, and learning how to like or love some parts of your body, and just bit by bit, as opposed to, well, if you just don't absolutely love your body and everything about it, you're failed. Because if
Yeah.
if we're setting ourselves up that that's the goal, probably not many people would pass that. And actually, in fact, I've talked to clients who and people who have been models and different sorts of careers like that, and I can tell you that they don't feel better about themselves, even though you think that they should, because they're perfect, aren't they? Like they don't feel like it either. So I think that the myth that of anyone who's feeling 100% sort of totally loves their body, I think that's a bit of a myth. I don't know if that person exists, but if they do, it's
I
not
think
many.
they do either. I think
Yeah.
it's a complete fallacy. And I
Yeah.
think even the ones that present that that's what they think, I suspect in those quiet little moments, they think quite different thoughts about themselves.
Yes, yeah, definitely.
Mm.
And there's some other things too that I wanted to talk to you about. So one of them is, you sort of touched on it before, but so when we were growing up, it was all about being, well, it got to a point anyway where it's all about being super skinny, and there was the sort of the Kate Moss heroin chic look.
Yeah, the Coke and cigarette diet.
Yeah. So there was that kind of thing, and look, that certainly wasn't healthy, and there was a lot of people with eating disorders, sort of anorexia and those kinds of things. What's happened now is, not saying that they don't exist, because they do still exist, but again, the way the world is, things seem to just swing one way or the other. So what's happened is it's kind of swung in another direction, where, like when I was at school, there was one girl in my class who you would consider to be obese.
Mm.
It was just one, and it was very rare and it was very unusual. Now it's very, very common, and this, like, obviously there's a whole other topic about health in regards to this and the obesity epidemic and all of that, and it's not really where we're going to today. But I what I've noticed now is we've got this, and I've done an episode on it, so my listeners probably have heard it before, but we've got this health at every size movement. And I have a real problem with that, as in, I don't believe your worth, how many kilos you weigh has nothing to do with your worth. So, whatever size you are does not change your worth. So, sort of just put that to side for now. But just from a health point of view, I just don't believe in health at every size. I believe health at many sizes. And I don't think there's only one size or one shape that you can be to be healthy. Absolutely. But you cannot be healthy at any size. Kate Moss was not healthy, and nor is Lizzo, and she's actually doing something about it now. It's interesting because she's kind of like the queen of that movement. So, what are your thoughts on that? This sort of now, it's like almost it's one thing to accept and, like you said, love yourself, but there's a whole other thing to almost
Yeah,
celebrate. I don't know what's.
we're of about the same vintage. So I'm 47 in December, and I think, unfortunately, in our efforts to accept and love everybody, we have normalized very bad habits.
Yes.
And like I have an 11-year-old son who is probably carrying a little bit of extra weight, and he has some mental health challenges. He's a bit neurospicy, God love him. So we have eating challenges, and that's something that I'm very aware I need to address. But we talk about, and he doesn't like feeling fat, and we talk about it's actually about being healthy, not about being fat or skinny.
Mm,
But I noticed at school, I was the same. When you went to school, when we grew up, there was a small amount of kids that were overweight or obese. And now it's actually the other way,
mm,
where, unfortunately, obesity has almost become the new normal.
yes.
And I'm very much of the same opinion as you, that our worth is not based on the way we look or our weight.
Mm,
But I do think their health has got to be a component.
yes.
Are you eating well? Are you, feeding your body what it needs to survive? Are you moving or exercising? And I actually think this is a self-care and a self-love exercise.
Yes.
And I think we've just got to the point where, in this view to accept all, and in this politically correct world where you actually can't question people's choices and behaviours, I do think we've gone a little bit too far the other way, and health
Yes.
has been forgotten.
Yeah. And also to call what some of these people are doing to their bodies, like they refer to it as self-love, to be eating all this garbage and really abusing your body isn't self-love,
No.
right? It's just not. So there's a difference, and I'm not saying we all have to be perfect or anything like that. And I exercise and I eat really well, and sometimes I eat chocolates and other things as well. But largely, I look after myself. But if I was, eating crap all day every day, that's not self-love. That's actually sabotaging myself, right? That's actually actively damaging myself. So some of these sort of people who are famous for this, and there's YouTube accounts where people eating themselves to death,
Mm.
with people cheering them on. Basically, it's just warped stuff. Calling some of that self-love, and sort of owning it is, you go girl, and this kind of that's a whole nother level.
Yeah,
So
and I think there's a large amount of denial about where a lot of that stuff's coming from. I think
yes,
um, I don't believe some of these choices come from a healthy place.
no,
Um,
no,
and I think that's where the challenge, and I don't say that from a place of judgment. I say it from a place of observation and a place of someone who has worked through this, and I know when my mental health is not good, I
mm,
am looking for things to put butter on. It's
yeah,
one of my resources. It's one of my ways of checking out a little bit, or letting go when I'm in overwhelm.
mm,
And so I do think that there are emotional and mental components to this
mm,
that are
yeah,
not self-love,
yes,
unfortunately. And I
mm,
think we've come to this place where I don't want people to be fat shamed, and I don't want people, to be treated badly if they're not healthy. But I do want them to accept that they're not healthy, and when they're ready, maybe be supported to make the changes that they need to make to
Yes.
love themselves and support their body in the way that our bodies are built to be supported.
Yeah, yeah. Look, it's not any healthier than the Kate Moss thing,
No.
and so one extreme or the other extreme, it's not health. And I think that it's weird because we're normalizing what I would class as to be disorders and problems and things that aren't healthy, and then we're kind of we're pathologizing other things. It's weird. It's just weird. This world has sort of got a bit weird, but yeah, I it's not a disrespect to anyone or a judgment to anyone at all. I've got my struggles. We've all have our struggles. It's just saying that, and it's not saying that someone who is in that sort of, like say someone like Lizzo or whoever it is, it's not saying that that person should feel ashamed or be shamed or any of that. It's just saying that that's not healthy,
Mm.
and you can have compassion and support and all the rest of it. Because I'm also aware, I feel like a lot of our look, and there's like chemicals and there's our food system and there's all the levels of things that have contributed to this. So it's sort of not one thing, and also a lot of mental health issues and a lot of pushing our feelings down, and we do it
And
with
also,
food.
even there's socioeconomic factors
Yes,
too, and
yeah,
education. And if
yeah,
your parents don't know how to cook healthy food,
yes, yeah,
and we live in this world, unfortunately, where sometimes it's cheaper to buy crap than
yes,
actually healthy food. And so I just think the system is inherently broken, and we are
yes.
setting people up for failure and not success, unfortunately.
Yeah, definitely. And I also think that the diet industry has contributed to it as well. And a lot of the dieting language and a lot of the language that we've all grown up with about fat being the worst thing you can be and blah, blah, blah. And so I understand that sort of pretty much the industry that I'm in, which is sort of nutrition and health, I understand that we contributed to this with some of our behavior in the industry. However, the cure isn't to say like Lizzo's a health kind of
Hmm.
something to aim for. So it's like you can acknowledge that there's one thing is wrong, but don't go to the opposite thing. There's got to be balance in there somewhere. We're going to find a balance in there. And I think I think a lot of people, because they're wholeheartedly rejecting diet culture, which I understand, and which a big part of that I applaud. It's kind of now, yeah, it's swung quite the opposite end, which also is quite unhealthy.
Yeah, I can only hope. I remember, at school doing legal studies, and a teacher talking about the pendulum effect, where it usually has to swing completely the other way before it can find a place in the middle. So
Yeah.
I do hope that we find a place in the middle, but
Yeah,
I
yeah, so
definitely
do
feel
I.
the same as you, where we've gone from one extreme to the next.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And then look, there's one other topic I wanted to touch on, and I'm aware of time. We haven't got a lot of time, but just you and I were also sort of before we started this recording here, we were talking a little bit about things like plastic surgery and just basically the different things that we can or we some of us do to make ourselves feel better. And I was sort of saying to you that I'm a little bit sort of part of me is like, oh, I completely understand it. And I understand why, the Hollywood types would want to do things to their face, because when you see those big giant, everyone's got a big giant TV screen. And when you see what your face looks like, and now sort of at the age of 53, starting to notice some different things about my body and my face or whatever, that I think, oh, okay, I'm kind of getting more and more why they do these surgeries and stuff. So part of me is kind of like, I understand why. And, you go girl and do whatever is right for you. And another part of me is, oh my God, some of them look so ridiculous. What the hell? And why do they have to do that? So I'm a little bit, I'm not one way or the other. I'm sort of a little bit all over the place with how I feel about things like plastic surgeries, that kind of thing. What are your feelings about those kinds of things?
I'm a little bit the same as you. So I have actually had my boobs done. I did that about maybe must be about 13 years ago. And it was the best 10 grand I've ever spent. And I've also had Botox. And look, I use good skincare and I take care of myself. And so for me, I think it's got to be about you and you do it for you. So for me, it had been something, particularly my breast augmentation, had been something I'd thought about for a long time. I'd already had 2 of my 3 children. So I'm not a petite little flower, and I didn't feel like my breasts were in proportion to my body. I didn't like the shape of my breasts as well. So it wasn't till I went and saw a surgeon that I actually realized I had a condition called tubular breast condition. They called it tubular breast. So I didn't have a lot of breast tissue, particularly underneath my nipple. So my breasts were not a nice shape.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I had my surgery, my surgeon, unfortunately, God love him, has passed away, but he was this beautiful older man that was very well known for matching implants in women so that their bodies were in proportion, and it was very well done. You know, I've had a midwife who didn't even feel the implants. So I try to enhance myself whilst looking natural. And that's my choice. I worry about men and women who make choices based on trends and based on trying to change the way they look for another person, or even change the way they look because they don't feel good enough. I think that is a slippery slope to travel down. So I'm a bit like you where I have a foot in each camp. You know, we were laughing before we started the recording about, you know, the duck lip phase. And I worry about young girls having surgery. I have a 20-year-old daughter and, you know, she's joked about baby Botox and getting her lips done. I didn't start to have surgery. So I would have been in my 30s when I had my boobs done, and I didn't have Botox till 40. I feel like if we start messing with ourselves too early, it just becomes a never-ending process. But I do acknowledge that, you know, people have the right to do what they want to their bodies. But I think sometimes people don't think about what they're doing. So, you know, Botox is injecting yourself with botulism. And I think you need to be real about that. And you are paralyzing muscles in your face. And you can't make choices like that without an impact. You know, when you're putting filler in your body, you're putting a foreign body into your system. So I think people need to think about why they're making the choice. Not necessarily that they don't need to do it. If it's what they really want, I think people have the right to make that choice. But for me, it's always been about, who am I doing this for? Why am I doing it? You know, am I trying to address something that probably needs some psychological assessment? And you know, I think even with my breast surgery and my Botox, I am very aware to look at, you know, my body image and my thoughts and where is this coming from. And I think if you take these procedures with a more holistic view, you know, looking at, what am I doing to my body? You know, what are the risks? What are the potential benefits? Why am I doing it? I think then you're a little bit more informed when you make the choice, because there's always risks. Things can go wrong. And, you know, I've talked to my daughter about, you know, procedures and things like that. And I'm like, you know, what happens if you do something at 20 and it goes wrong and then you end up, worse isn't the right word, but, you know, disfigured at a young age because you made a choice trying to make yourself look better?
Yes.
Are you willing to take that risk? Are you willing to live with the potential consequences?
Yes.
And if you are, then, you know, then go ahead and do it. But if you haven't even kind of thought those things through, I think you're playing with fire.
Yeah, definitely. And I have had clients who've been sort of poisoned by their breast surgery and things like that. So I think you do you have to take these things seriously. They're serious surgeries, and I think the people who go off and do cheap surgeries overseas, or they get this Brazilian butt lifts and things those fad things that make you look like some sort of cartoon character. I don't know. And what I've noticed today too, apparently when people go to the plastic surgeon, we used to take pictures of our favorite movie star or model or whatever it was, but now they're taking like AI pictures of themselves.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, so they're trying to, and all the other thing they're trying to do is it's sort of a crossover thing, but look like a lot of those Japanese anime kind
Yeah,
of
yeah,
things, and so they're actually trying to look like non-human,
yeah. Or
which is
Barbie dolls or things like that.
yeah,
And look, I actually do think there is a duty of care with surgeons as well, and I think there is very responsible surgeons, but I
mm,
do think there are surgeons that are not responsible, and I do think there's times where they need to actually be like, hang on a second, I think you need to think about this. This is not coming from a healthy place.
yeah,
Um, but I think, just doing your due diligence, I worry about things like the fads, like the Brazilian butt lift. And because, you do a surgical procedure and then the fad changes and that's actually not the desired look. And then
yeah.
you've got to live with this. And I think that those kinds of things are a slippery slope.
Yes. Yeah, and like we said before, we had sort of Kate Moss, the sort of bone stick figure, and now it's the kind of Kardashian look, and another 5 or 10 years, it's going to be whatever look that's going to be, and yeah, I think that surgeries and those kinds of things, like I'm not completely against them, and I do know people who've benefited and really glad that they've done it. I also know people who regret it
Mm,
very much. And I do agree with you, though, that unless there's something really, really wrong for young women to get started, or young people in general, I think it's not a good idea to start interfering and with your face. And what I've noticed is the stars that you see who start interfering with their face at a really young age, they start looking really strange by the time they get to our age. And so I think the later you start, the more you're going to keep with a relatively natural look.
I
But when
think
you
so.
start earlier, it seems to be. And also, there's a go back to sort of me when I was like a size 6, or you, and we talk about the fact that we've still got these voices in our head.
Mm.
I don't think there's a surgery that is going to completely cure anybody's image about their body. It might enhance it or help you. It might do the opposite. It could go either way.
I
But
think if you don't address the voice and the underlying causes of the voice, the surgeries can actually almost make it worse, because I think you just get more hypercritical about what's going on,
yeah.
and then you notice other things that you want to correct.
Yeah, exactly. Because, like it's not a magic cure. And like you said, once you get into that mode of looking at yourself the way a surgeon looks at someone's face or looks at someone and says, oh, this could be there and that could be there. There's a whole bunch of things that you would have never thought about. And now that you're sitting in a surgeon's office and you're seeing all these pictures, or you're going, whatever, they're going through their catalogs, or you're just with someone who you're paying to kind of
Mm.
judge the way you look, yeah, you start thinking about things in a way you never have before. And then you see the people, even the people like, Michael Jackson when he was alive, and people who just don't seem to have that they can't stop, no
Yeah,
matter how much damage they're doing to themselves, no matter how much they've made themselves look like an alien or whatever,
yeah,
they can't stop, and that's not healthy. So yeah, I think it's one of those things. It's like a lot of things. There's a lot of tools that you could use to support and enhance the way you look,
yeah.
but they don't fix your mental health. They're
Correct,
not a magic cure, and
correct.
they do have to be considered very carefully. And the same would be said for my same concern for surgeries that we're doing to minors now in regards to sex reassignment, that kind of thing.
Yeah,
When you look at the data, it says that puberty is the cure for most people with a lot
mm.
of these issues. And so, not allowing people to go through a natural puberty or doing surgeries at those ages, I actually think is very damaging and not helpful at all.
I agree with you on that too. So I'm very. I do believe that there are people that genetically or whatever are conceivably born into the wrong bodies, but I don't believe there's rush to make intervention. So, live as whatever gender you wish to live as,
Mm.
but leave your biology until you're at a stage where you can make an informed choice.
Yes.
Let your body stop growing before you make a drastic change.
Yeah.
Because there's terrible stories about people that, went on hormone blockers and had surgery and then got to adulthood and actually have changed their mind. And I
Yes.
just think, if this is truly what you want, there is no rush. You have the time to take to be sure this is the decision you want to make. Um,
Yes. Yeah.
we mentioned before, once upon a time, these processes took a really, really long time. You had to go through a certain amount of psychological work before you were even allowed to go on any hormone treatment. Then you had to be on hormones for a period of time before you were actually allowed to have any surgery. And now everything's been sped up. And I actually think there is no rush.
Yes.
You can make these changes and you can live as you like.
Mm.
But when you make these drastic biological changes, there's no going back. So I don't think they should be rushed.
No, no. And I've done a fair deep dive into this, and I personally do believe that, particularly with girls who want to transition to be boys, there is a real social contagion around this. Many of them have, yeah, either autism or they've got some sort of neurospicy thing going on, and many of them have had some sort of sexual assault or some other, that there's other issues that are causing them to feel that way, and that's not being addressed, and it's just like, oh yes, they're all in the wrong body, and that's just, I think there's been like a 3,000% increase with girls, and it's very clear when you look at the trends. The girls are very much affected by social contagion, and
Mm.
I personally think this is one of them. Not saying there's no legit people who really feel that way, all the rest of it, but I think there is a huge social contagion element, and there are many thousands of detransitioners, and I think there'll be many more. And yes, I just don't think it's a good idea when you're that young. Hey, look, I'm still figuring out my body and settling into my body and figuring it all out. And I'm 53. I just don't think you know when you're 12.
I just think there's no rush. I think there are steps that you can take that enable you to live that way, that
Yeah,
when you're battling, it's not perfect. You can
yeah,
band your breasts and you can do things like that,
yeah,
but it gives you time to sort through it. It gives times for hormones to settle down,
yeah,
you to process your feelings and work out what's really going on before you start interfering with your hormones, because that hormone therapy can be taken at any time.
yeah,
It's not going to stop your ability to transition if you choose later on. But
yes.
if you transition early and it turns out it was not the right thing, the
Mm.
impact of that is there's no going back.
Yeah, yeah. Wait till you're grown up. Puberty cures this situation in most cases, and if it doesn't, like you said, when you're an adult, you can address that. It's like I'm hyper aware of time, so I just, before we go though, is there anything else in regards to this sort of whole topic that you would like to add that you think would be useful, or do you feel like we've covered it fairly thoroughly?
I think we've covered lots of things, but it's a bit like the mental health topic. You and I are both very passionate about this.
Mm,
So I suppose I would just say, if anyone has any questions, to reach out to either of us.
mm.
So we'll put my details in the show
In the show
notes.
notes. Yep. And what's the best place? We'll be in the show notes, but what's the best place for people to get in contact with you, or best way?
Look, probably easiest is social media, although I'm not always fabulous at updating things. But my Instagram and Facebook is Sam Ebblewhite SS, so for somatic sexology.
Mm,
And my website is samebblewhite.com.au.
yeah.
So they're the easiest ways to kind of reach out and contact me. I'm more than happy if people have questions. Probably via social media is the easiest way. But it's definitely an area that I'm very passionate about, and so more than happy to talk with people about it.
Yeah, and if you're having these issues, you're not alone. They are really, really common. I've talked to thousands of women, and I'm sure you've talked to many, many people as well. And it's just really, really common. So just know that there's nothing terribly wrong with you. We're human, and we're living a human life, and this is part of it. But and yeah, ask for help, and yeah, ask for help. You don't have to do this alone.
That's right. But know that if there's something that you're not happy with, about your life. You actually have the power to make changes too. You don't
Yes.
have to sit in that unhappiness.
No.
There are healthy ways and healthy steps you can take to rewrite those stories that don't serve you.
Yeah, exactly that. And I think I think the theme for this with you and I that we've discussed is that any physical changes you do need the emotional changes to go with it. You need to sort of fix up here, fix your mind as well, not just looking at changing your body because the two go together.
Yeah, embodied approach, mind, body, spirit. It's got to be
Yes,
holistic. One
absolutely.
won't fix the other.
No, no. So, look, thank you so much for coming on today and being so honest. I really appreciate your experience and your wisdom.
Thank you so much. I love chatting. We're very in line with what we think, and I'm having lots of fun with you. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. I'm really enjoying it, and thank you for everyone at home who is watching or listening. Can you please like, subscribe, share, tell other people about this podcast so I get a bit more traction? I'd really appreciate that. This is a podcast where we have real conversations about things that matter. So see you all next week. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.